G'day guys, Luke here. Welcome back to another video. In today's video guys, we're looking at the pros and cons of a glass reptile enclosure as well as a wooden reptile enclosure. While we're at it, let's discuss fish tanks, as some people use those as reptile enclosures, and also what you guys need to be aware of and what to consider when buying an enclosure for your pet reptile. But we'll start with our glass enclosures first. So some of the pros that a glass enclosure have is, I find personally they're a lot easier to clean to a wooden enclosure, especially with stains. You just get a bit of disinfectant, off it goes. With glass, with wood, if it bakes on a little bit, you got to kind of scrub a bit harder to get that stain off to make the enclosure look cleaner. For me, another thing I do look out for is ventilation. Ventilation to me is very important to a reptile enclosure. Now yes, you'll lose your heat with glass enclosures, however it's more the humidity I'm more worried about. I find with humidity you can have more problems with bacteria growing, and that's when illnesses like respiratory infection sets in place and other things like that can occur. So I'd rather have my enclosures have nice airflow so my reptiles can breathe nice clean air. Now of course we know wooden enclosures, or wooden in general, does over time rot and deteriorate. Of course glass doesn't rot or deteriorate, it lasts eternity unless you break it. Being very fragile, glass breaks. Wooden enclosures are more sturdier, so that's why some people go with that, as there's less chance of them breaking. Which was one of the cons just then, is glass breaks easier than wooden. We just went through as well, it loses heat a lot better. However, on a later video I will show you guys a way to maintain heat in glass enclosures. It's an easy fix, but that'll be a video for another day. If you guys know the trick already, you're doing well. If you don't know, let me know in the comments down below, and I'm happy to share my knowledge or things I have learned over the years. Another thing too, I don't know if it's me just being weak because I've got no muscle in my arms at all. I find glass enclosures are heavier than wooden enclosures. Stacking. Now, unless you buy the same model enclosure, same brand, and you get those stackers, stacking a glass enclosure can be quite simple and easy. However, if you're buying different brands, different sizes, it's going to be a bit more of a nightmare. That's why I've gone to like a hardware store, got these shelving units, and just stack my enclosures on that. Made it 10 times easier for me. Unlike with a wooden enclosure where you can just easily just stack me quite, just go, yep, put you on top of you, put on top of you. But there is an issue with that, which we'll get back to with wooden enclosures in a moment. Apart from that, that's kind of the pros and cons I have with glass. If you guys have anything with glass enclosures, feel free to say in the comments down below. Knowledge is free, so let's share it around, and that way we help everybody in the community. Going over to a wooden enclosure, this is some of the pros that I have. Of course I mentioned it with glass, is that they will keep heat in a lot better than a glass enclosure will. Now with stacking, it's great, it's easy to stack, you just put one on top of another. Little tip guys, make sure you reinforce those sort of enclosures by putting metal bracing or just something in there that prevents the warping, which we get to in a moment. However, they've got more cons I find personally over pros. Holding humidity, like I said, can make your reptile sick if you don't have very good ventilation. With the timber as well, if you have them stacking, it will warp over time. So I find with that problem is that you can't get the glass doors off to service the enclosure better. As well with reptiles, they're very good at finding weaknesses in the enclosure. Let's say there's a small gap where the timber has warped, and that's an easy access point for the reptile to exploit, squeeze through, and they can escape. So that's why I do stress, if you are going to stack enclosures like what I've done in the snake room with my wooden enclosures, I have reinforced the very bottom enclosure for that purpose. That way I can sleep easier at night knowing nothing's going to happen to that enclosure. Of course, if you're having reptiles in the enclosure, it's more better having a desert species in there because then you don't have to worry too much about water damage. If you have a tropical animal or wetland animal like a water dragon for example, your enclosures won't last as long if you don't have them properly coated or properly sealed. There's ways of doing so, but yeah, just gotta make sure it's done proper, otherwise your enclosure over time will start deteriorating and start to pretty much explode. Right, we'll get onto our fish tanks. Now, I do personally get quite annoyed at people who put reptiles in fish tanks. Don't get me wrong, I have made that mistake in the past, I will own up to it. It's a stupid mistake to make. You got to look at the title, we got reptile enclosure, you put reptiles in it. Fish tanks for fish. The only reptiles that you can basically put in fish tanks and can get away with it quite successfully is turtles, because obviously they need somewhere to swim. And for me, I find the only difference between a fish and a turtle is that a turtle just needs an island and some heating and UV. Fish don't need that. but otherwise they keep them like a fish. That's why I don't have turtles. Um, and I have heard as well frogs, but for me, I'm a bit worried about if you, depending on the sort of enclosure that you have or fish tank you have, if it's one of those like sliding lids or lids that can easily fold open, frogs can open that, so you got to be mindful. Otherwise, I have personally made that mistake in the past with Monty, my shingleback, Blue and Bow, my two blue tongues, even Emma, my children python, and Murray, who was my coastal. I put them in fish tanks as well. But the one thing that kind of dawned on to me until later on is, of course, that airflow. It's very important for that airflow to move around. Otherwise, that's when stuff like respiratory infections can happen. It's happened to me before with Murray. He got sick because of that reason. No, sorry, Emma. Emma got sick because of that reason. Because obviously with fish tanks, they just don't hold water and they don't really have good airflow. That's why all your reptile enclosures have those side ventilations or top ventilations or both. It's very important to have that airflow for a bearded dragon, a python, a blue tongue. Don't get me wrong, a blue tongue is harder to keep and it can keep them in a fish tank, or you can somewhat be successful with that. But some reptiles you can't. They just don't do well in fish tanks, and that's why they're called fish tanks, not reptile tanks, and there's differences in the two. But apart from that, that's what my little rant is about, and my, you could say, pet peeve in a way is people owning reptiles in fish tanks. It's an easy mistake to happen. It happens to the best of us. But of course, it's better off sharing that knowledge. Otherwise, we all make that mistake eventually. Apart from that, guys, I hope today's video helps with the pros and cons with a glass and wood enclosure and what to be mindful about fish tanks. Other than that, guys, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care.